All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting, our first of 2021. David Hall and I are going to be your presenters today. Our goal is to talk for less than 30 minutes combined, and then we will answer any questions you have on any topic we cover. I've seen we've already had a question asked about vaccine, and we will answer that in our presentation, but I suspect there'll be more vaccine questions, and so that's one of the topics we're going to cover today. But you can ask us about anything else as well, so it doesn't have to be limited to what we talk about. All right, so during our remarks, our plan is to cover these 4 topics that are on the screen: our financial situation, COVID-19 data from last semester, new COVID initiatives for this semester, and then update you on what we know about the vaccine. And let me just tell you, we've known 100 different things in the last 24 hours on the vaccine. It is a moving target, and so we will share everything we know about that topic with you today, knowing that it could change by the time this virtual webinar is over. But we want everybody to know everything we know, and we are working hard to get that information to you and have been for some time. All right. Along the way, I'm going to ask you, I've got 3 questions I'm going to ask you. You'll see those pop up on your screen, and I will give everyone time to cast their votes. We'll share the results with everyone. Our first survey question you've seen before. It's essentially will allow me to learn who's on the call. And so everybody, please answer this first question. Who is participating in the call? Pick your category. And if you're just an interested community member, then you would be in the other category. Media would be in the other category. Everyone, please answer that question. Okay, Andrea, let's go ahead and close that out here in about 5 seconds. There we go. All right, and so that we have mostly our faculty and staff online, and that's by design. This agenda and the information we're going to share is intended for our workforce. And so anyone else is welcome to stay online, but this agenda today is for our faculty, staff, and administrators. As I mentioned at the end of our presentation, we'll take questions. And so depending on how many questions there are, certainly possible we may not be able to answer all of them. However, our communication team will work through the questions submitted. Suzanne Shaw, our Vice President for Marketing and Communications, will again ask the questions today. We do have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, so we'll go until then, answering as many questions as we can get to. This slide shows you how to ask a question. We'll put this slide up again at the end of the presentation, so you'll have another chance to look at it. And one other thing, as in the past, please do not use the question and answer function to comment on what you hear. It really becomes too challenging to then sort out the comments from the questions. And so if you would just put questions into the Q&A function, we would appreciate that. We are recording this, and so you can go back and watch it again. You can tell your friends and other coworkers to watch it again. It'll be posted on the university website next week. And so with that intro, let's go ahead and get started with the financial update. So we all worked together over the past year to recruit students, retain students, and create a budget in line with anticipated revenue. By and large, that work paid off. Almost all of revenue, as you know, comes from 2 sources: state appropriations and tuition. And we have had success over the past month in both of these areas. You may be surprised by that because you will remember in July, the governor withheld almost $12 million of our state funding. But in October of last year, he released $1.7 million. We're using that to fund the pay raise that goes into effect in this year. And then in January, literally a week and a half ago, he released the remaining $10.2 million. When he released those funds last week, we got direction, all of higher ed did, on how we could spend that money. And so $8.4 million, we were directed to spend that on maintenance and repair projects. And so we're in the process of finalizing those projects. We will fund on both campuses, and we will bring our recommendations to the Board of Governors at the Executive Committee meeting on Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. I would tell you we owe Governor Parson a big thank you for prioritizing higher education and making decisions on what funds he would release. He did not release all funds. And so we're pleased that all of ours for this year have been released. We've also obviously benefited from federal money. We were awarded over $30 million in federal funds to offset university and student expenses associated with the pandemic. And additional money, another $25.5 million, should be on the way to help us soon through the spring. Federal money has been critical for paying for things such as testing, technology. We have an additional 60 Zoom rooms that were set up over the break, cleaning and other costs that we have incurred as we responded to COVID-19. These funds were critical also in support of students. We've already distributed directly to students over $12 million in funding, and we're looking for other opportunities to distribute more money to students as we move forward. Some of that new money, that $25.5 million, is earmarked directly for students. We're waiting for direction from the federal government on what we can spend that on and what are the parameters. And so I don't have answers to those questions, but know that $25 million more is coming to us from the federal government in the CARES package that was passed early January and signed into law by the president a couple of weeks ago. One person connected to Missouri had a tremendous input in making sure higher ed got an additional funding package, and that was Senator Blunt. He was one of the people engaged on making those decisions. And so I have privately told him how much we appreciate his work, and I wanted to publicly recognize his work. We would not have gotten this $25 million but for Senator Blunt's work on this CARES package. Moving next to enrollment. Enrollment this fall, as you all probably know, did beat projections. We were actually up in enrollment in the fall. Based on preliminary figures, it does appear that we will be down 400 to 500 students this spring. However, our enrollment is still well above what was projected in the budget, and our enrollment success this year is thanks to all of your good work. Our faculty and staff have worked tirelessly to recruit, retain, and meet the needs of our students during a very challenging semester. And so I want to publicly thank all of you for the good work that you have done. Because of these positive developments in both enrollment and state funding, the board approved a mid-year pay raise. Full-time faculty and staff hired on or before November 30th will receive a $600 per year across the board raise. That increase will begin this month, January paychecks for 12-month employees, and will be in the February paychecks for the first time for 9 and 10-month employees. We used the $1.7 million the governor released earlier in the year in October to fund that $600 across the board raise. Looking ahead, on January 27th, Governor Parson will announce his budget recommendations for the next fiscal year. Once those recommendations are out, our Executive Budget Committee will begin to meet. We already have our first meeting scheduled, and we'll begin to develop budget recommendations for the year beginning July 1st. I want to conclude our finance discussion with a word of reassurance for everyone. Despite uncertainty last spring, our budget situation as we begin this semester is much stronger than we anticipated it would be. There is no reason to think that layoffs or furloughs are in our foreseeable future. Rather, I am hopeful we will work to increase departmental budgets, make additional hires, and increase compensation during the next budget cycle. So for the next part of the presentation today, I'm going to turn the meeting over to David Hall to summarize our COVID-19 data from last semester, and then to discuss some of the new initiatives that are underway for this semester. And then David will also update you on what we know right now about the vaccine. And literally, we're getting in new information even as we're doing this presentation. And so as we get that new information in about the state's distribution plans, hot off the press, we'll share it with you today. Again, if you have questions over the budget, over financial issues, hold those. We'll take those all at the end. But David, let me turn it over to you to update everyone on the coronavirus issues.
All right, thank you, President Smart. Ryan, if you'll go ahead and share that screen. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to cover what we had last fall to give you a good perspective. Obviously, our core executive team is evaluating this every single week as we monitor it. You can see our initial spike that we had, and then how it, once we got past that initial peak, then we were running a fairly level throughout the rest of the semester, which was much more in line with a manageable level that we would expect. The next slide really breaks that down as well. What were the kinds of cases that we had? And as you could see, about 80% of our student cases were those that lived off campus. And then you can see in the green where that we've got the students that lived on campus. And really the one I want to draw attention to is our staff that we have, and the faculty in the maroon and the red made those where they're easier to see. Staff has been pretty level throughout the semester and consistent. And so that's something we really want to monitor of how do we keep those down. But that's, you know, so you can kind of get it in relationship to overall what we were seeing within our campus. One of the questions we tend to get is, so how much testing are we doing? This graph breaks it down and provides a lot of information about, you know, where is the testing occurring, and, you know, when is it peaking? You can see the natural ebb and flow by day of the week. You'll see a few of those large ones with like the orange. That's where we go out and do targeted testing. So for example, at homecoming, we did a significant amount, as well as, you know, whenever we're looking for a residence hall out that may have an outbreak. And then you can see the red is the surveillance. So it's, you know, individuals were wanting to go home over Thanksgiving and Christmas. We certainly saw an uptick in the amount of that was taken throughout the semester. One of the factors we know is critical to us to be able to remain in a seated format is our campus housing availability. Not surprisingly, it kind of follows along with what we had with our case volume, where we saw initial peak and then we saw it go down. So the one in the maroon is the Q, is Kentwood. And so as you see that, that's where we were running, and it has capacity of 73. And so if you really look over to the right towards the latter half of the semester, you're seeing the ones that we're moving to the Christina, which is an apartment complex that we have for our positives, and then you see the others that are going into Kentwood. So those numbers certainly have been very stable after we got into the early October. So on this section, this kind of wraps up an overview. Total number of cases that we had, 1,439. You can see that breakdown on students as well as the employees. One of the questions I tend to regularly get is, so what percentage of your students or of your students have had this? And we were running at the end of the semester, 5.96% of our total number of students had tested positive sometime during that semester. Whenever you compare that to the county, they were at 6.08%. So we were very much in line with the total population that's been had tested positive at some point during that period. And then, as you can see, the amount of testing, as well as one of the questions we get, is the positivity rate. The surveillance test ended up being 1.68%, which is where that we were doing asymptomatic testing. Just as people stopped by, we were doing that throughout the week, throughout the semester. So that's kind of that underlying, and that's certainly a very good number that we were pleased to see that it remained fairly stable and actually at a fairly low level that was just slightly under what the community was. So for next semester, so that talked about the last semester. Now moving forward, obviously we'll continue those things that we did during the fall, and then we've added some additional things. So for example, wastewater surveillance testing. We're pretty excited about this. We were actually doing it last semester, but we would have to send the sample off, and it might be 2 or 3 weeks before we got the results back. It also wasn't a perfect match with our housing. So we have invested in the equipment, as well as Dr. Holm in one of our faculty members here is analyzing the results. So now we can look at every single individual residence hall, and they get analyzed, and we get the results back within just like 3 days. And so that we're constantly looking at, if we see an increase in that surveillance, the wastewater, then we can go in and quickly be able to test all the students living in there to be able to pull out those that are positive, that, you know, that they don't realize that they're positive. So we think that's a very good proactive strategy that will be able to, again, keep our case volume down. One of the things we also did was we did return to campus testing. Many of you are probably familiar with that. This was a huge logistical issue in trying to get all of our on-campus students tested. We did both a rapid test as well as a follow-up with the PCR test. And we were able to pull out about 30 of our students that would have moved into the residence hall. We were able to capture ahead of time, and where that they did not move in. That also prevented others from getting from being put into quarantine because they'd spent a few days with them. So we felt like that was very successful. Our goal with that program is to try and keep it from getting a peak. What we saw with whenever we return to campus in the fall, we know we're going to have some increase in that. That's to be expected over the next couple of weeks. But we think this is going to really help be able to keep that to where that it doesn't peak as high. And then the last thing we've done is we've really expanded our rapid testing capability. We had received the rapid tests from the federal government at no cost to us. We've also invested heavily into the saliva PCR-based testing. So as I mentioned, if we see wastewater surveillance numbers going up, then what we would, in a residence hall, for example, then we could quickly go in and start testing those students, and we could get the rapid test back immediately in order to, really be able to be proactive on that. So we're pretty excited about the opportunities that we're going to have with that. We can also expand that to other groups. So for example, students that are going out and doing maybe audiology testing of children in schools, in K through 12 schools, that we could test them on a regular basis, so that we're making sure that they're not getting exposed, or that if they are, that they're not exposed to anybody else. So that's 3 of ours that we're very excited about. And then the last thing, and probably the thing that most people are excited about, is the vaccine. So some of the things to know is the state has established a series of phases as well as tiers within those phases. So the primary phase is category 1A, that is healthcare workers, as well as those affiliated with long-term care facilities. That is the highest priority for the state, and they've been working on that ever since they first received vaccines in the state of Missouri. The second phase is the phase 1B. Many of you have heard about that, the announcement yesterday by the governor that we're now moving into phase 1B. It's subdivided into 3 tiers. And so the first tier in general are first responders such as police and fire, those that are responding to emergency type situations. Public health is another one of those. Tier 2 within 1B are those over the age of 65, as well as anyone between the ages of 16 and 64 that have underlying medical conditions. So that's a second one that we have. And then so that's our tiers, and then it goes down to critical workers below that. We were disappointed that higher ed was not included as part of that phase 1B, but I do want you to know that the limiting factor is still the ability to receive vaccine. So they get a limited number of shipments into the state, and then they try to spread those out. So far, the health department, Mercy, Cox, Jordan Valley are the ones who've received those. And so we're hoping that we're expecting, Majors has requested theirs. We're expecting to hopefully get on that list to be able to start getting those. And just to let you know that we were just notified literally today that majors will be getting a small amount of vaccine this coming Monday, so they would be able to start some limited vaccinations of our tier either 1A or 1B, the tier 1 and 2 within category 1B. More information will be coming on that, and we are working on the communications. We've already got it up on the website as far as some basic information about the vaccines, but literally this has just come in that they would get a small number of doses so that they can at least get started on that. And we're hoping that that becomes more regular. So with that, I think that will turn that over. Oh, I had one more slide, sorry. On the distribution method, two things that we had was we know at first it's going to be vaccine limited, and so our distribution plan is that it would be just like we have the flu shot. So you would notify the majors and sign up for a slot. You're going to sign up through that whenever whenever they say is we've got vaccine, then you would be able to go in and sign up for a slot. So that would be just regular ongoing as long as we have vaccine supply. At some point, there's an expectation that there will be lots of vaccine. And so we will look at standing up a mass vaccine distribution site potentially, and that would most likely be at some place such as Hammond Student Center where we ran our return to campus testing. So we do have that website that's up. We'll also be watching that for the latest information. We'll be including that in Inside Missouri State as well. One of the things that they've reiterated in the state's plan is if you have once you get to category 1B, then and there's vaccine available, you can go into seek your medical provider. So we have, obviously, Mercy is our healthcare provider for many of our employees. So this is the link to their website to where that you can go in, so you get notified as you're available to be slid in for vaccination or schedule a vaccination at that location as well.
All right, very good. Thank you, David. Couple of things. If you all go to our homepage and you click on COVID-19, that COVID-19 box, it will take you to a page that says COVID-19 updates and response. And we have replaced the box that was the campus what do we call that, David? Return to campus guide. We have replaced that box with a box that says COVID-19 vaccinations. If you click on that box, then we've begun to describe how the vaccine is being rolled out. There's a section that says, what group am I in? Can I get vaccinated now? And so this is the place you should regularly go to check to see what our status is. As David says, we expect majors will get vaccine on Monday. And so if you're above 65, for example, if you have one of the health conditions that's listed in the state's order, then you can sign up, probably beginning Tuesday, but more information to come, to get your vaccine next week. About a third of our workforce, about 800 people plus or minus, qualify under the Missouri order to get the vaccine. Now, we're not going to have 800 doses next week, but we may have 200 or 300. And so we can begin getting the first, third of our workforce vaccinated next week. And so stay tuned for that. You'll want to sign up just like you did for the flu vaccine. And that will begin next week. And I know I'm very excited about that possibility. All right. I know there'll be a bunch of questions on vaccine, and David will be here to answer those. Let me hit a couple more things, and then we'll open it up for you guys. As we think about this semester, our plan is, and everyone should know this, we're going to keep our current calendar for the spring semester intact. Spring break is still scheduled for March 15 through 19. Spring graduation is scheduled for May 14. We may add 1 or 2 additional ceremonies, either on that day or the day before. More to come shortly on that. That decision will be made next week. And so we will make adjustments like that as needed and as information develops throughout the semester. So the best advice I can give you now is plan to be on the current schedule, but know that we track information, we meet with critical players every single day, and if we need to make an adjustment, we will. So far, our numbers in Greene County are pretty good. The number of virus cases, our positivity rates, the number of hospitalizations are all down from their highs and from 30 days ago. For example, I checked this this afternoon. Today, there were 166 people hospitalized for COVID in either Cox or Mercy. 30 days ago, that number was 177. And on January 1st, that number was 230. And so numbers are coming down. That is also true in the state of Missouri, where numbers have come down over the last 7 days. On our campus, the dashboard is operating again. So far, 42 people, mostly students, mostly off-campus students, have tested positive. So again, we anticipate numbers comparable to those that we had in the last 5 to 6 weeks of the semester. We'll be seeing those again on our campus as we begin this semester. So Ryan, let's go to, I think I've got one more slide here to share with everyone. I did want to make sure everybody knows that we have made some policy revisions this semester. We eliminated the COVID-19 work and compensation policy. That policy laid out the plan we used last spring and summer to have as many people working from home. And so that policy expired at the end of December. We modified the 5 additional policies that are in it that you see on the screen there: masking, testing, emergency paid leave, events, and travel. And so and I would encourage you, again, go on the COVID website and under campus resources, under recent updates, you can see these policies. We have tightened them up. And so, for example, the masking policy specifically now prohibits eating or drinking in classrooms. Let me encourage you to enforce that. Our best way to manage through until we're all vaccinated is to require masking inside buildings, no exceptions. And so we've tightened that policy up. We've expanded our testing policy to indicate the additional testing that is ongoing. We've tightened up our events policy to actually reduce the number of people that can attend events. All of the policies except the emergency paid leave policy now go through March 31st. We'll again evaluate those as circumstances develop to determine if they need further adjustment or extension. our emergency paid leave policy. And about almost 400 people have taken advantage of that so far. That policy has been extended such that if you get coronavirus and you need to be home, that leave is still available for you. And that policy goes through June 30th. All right. So as David mentioned, we are working directly with our federal, state, and local leaders to get information about the virus and the vaccine as quickly as we possibly can get it. David and I met with local leadership last week. They are supportive of the plans that we have rolled out. Once we receive the vaccine on Monday, we will do whatever we need to do to make it available to you. And it could include various cancellations of classes or activities or modifying operations. If we get it chunks at a time like we're anticipating doing it, that will probably not be necessary. But again, I would check on Tuesday next week for the latest information on this first virus rollout at majors. Before we move to your questions, I want to get your input on two specific questions. Oh, and I also want to let you know that you should have received an email from Staff Senate if you're a staff member with a link to a staff survey. Let me encourage everyone who's a staff member to take the time to fill that survey out. It's important. It is shared with the Board of Governors. Decisions are made based upon that. And so let me encourage you to fill that out sometime in the next couple of weeks so that your voice matters on that. Okay, let's go to our second question for the group. We've got exactly 900 people on the call. And so if you're an employee, if you're a student, don't answer this. If you're a media or community member, don't answer this. But we need to get some sense of how many of you want to get vaccinated. And so here's the first question. If offered free of charge, and it will you get vaccinated for COVID-19? Got 4 choices there. I would also let you know that this is likely to be the incentive for you to get the health insurance premium waived partially for next year. And so that's likely to come into play as well, although we haven't officially announced that. So again, if free of charge, will you get vaccinated for COVID-19? First answer is yes, as soon as it's available. Second answer, yes, when I feel it's a safe option. The third and fourth answers are no. And so please choose what applies to you. We'll take about 30 seconds and then we'll share the results. All right, 10 more seconds here. And so get your answer in there. And then Andrea, when you're ready, if you can share the results with everyone. Okay, so good. That's exciting. We've got 95% of those that answered saying they will at some point will be willing to get the vaccine. I know I plan to get the vaccine as soon as it's available. So thank you for that. Our last question before we turn to your questions has to do with masking. And so how difficult has it been for you to enforce masking in your classroom, office, or work area? And so we got 4 choices there. Pick the one that is most appropriate to you and your experience from the first semester. And we'll take about 30 seconds. Okay, let's say 5 more seconds, and then Andrea will share the results with us here. Okay, not difficult, 85%, and another 11% said they were not comfortable doing it, but found it was not difficult. So 96% there. Let me encourage you, the next 2 to 3 months are going to be critical that we double down on masking, on washing our hands, new sanitation stations, spreading ourselves out, limiting our interaction with people until we get our workforce vaccinated again, which begins next week. And so thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to go to your questions. Remember that you can upvote questions. If you see someone else has asked a really good question, you want to make sure it's answered, you can upvote that. I've got people to help me answer your questions because, again, you may want to talk about things beyond vaccine and beyond the financial condition of the university. And so joining David and me as a part of this panel are Jim Baker. Dr. Baker runs our research, economic development, and international programs. David Claiborne, who's our internal public health expert. Jeff Coyner running our IT piece, our lawyer, Rachel Dockery, our provost, Frank Einhelig, Matt Morris, vice president for administration, Wes Pratt, our chief diversity officer, and Dee Cisco, student affairs. Let me ask this whole group if everyone could turn their videos on so that everybody can see you. And Suzanne, I'm going to pass the baton over to you to begin going through questions. Again, thank you everyone for joining us on this snowy afternoon. We've got 902 people on the call right now. Suzanne?
All right, I'll just let you know I'm kind of organizing them, or my team's organizing them, and the order I'm gonna go in is testing, vaccines, spring initiative, and data. I'm feeling a little like Jeopardy here, but we'll get to the bonus round later. First, on testing, you tested students who live on campus when they returned. Why not test students who would be returning and work on campus but live off campus, or graduate students?
Yeah, so it was quite a major undertaking to get 2,800 students tested over essentially a 3-day period. And we really wanted to focus on those students that were in congregate living, such that if they're using bathrooms together, et cetera, because that's where you can really have a breakout. And we offer asymptomatic testing every single day on campus for any student, for any employee that wants to do that. We also tested all 48 members of the chorale who went up to Jeff City to perform in the inauguration. And so really thought that we had the ability to do a group of about 3,000. It would have, the logistics of testing 20,000 students on campus would have made it, given the workforce that we have, very challenging. David, what else on that?
We've really, it's a risk-based approach. I would say, we've been there all week long in PSU. We have it available. So anybody who wants to get tested, we want the messages is come in and get tested. We put that on our website. So that's really the message. Anybody who wants to get tested can.
So, if your student workers, if you would like your student workers to get tested, send them out for the asymptomatic testing. We can have results back in about 48 hours.
Okay, and that also includes faculty and staff, correct?
It does.
You can come in and get the asymptomatic test. Great.
You can get tested every day if you want to.
Will return to campus testing be an ongoing thing for each break? For example, spring break.
Yeah, well, that's haven't gotten to that yet. It's not it's an idea worthy of consideration, and so. I actually hadn't thought that far ahead. This week has been one of those things that we're working like 30 minutes at a time. to try to get the vaccine piece figured out. But no, that will be on our agenda, and our core executive team and our leadership team that meets every Wednesday, we will add that to the agenda to talk about additional testing after spring break. And that's worthy of consideration.
Okay, great. I'm going to vaccines now. So will the vaccine at majors or the vaccines that we'll be giving be Pfizer or Moderna?
We are a Pfizer entity.
Okay. Will our frontline student employees be vaccinated at the same time as their frontline full-time coworkers?
David, you want to take that one?
I do, yeah. They do, because what the state looks at on their guidance is they look at what duties do you do, and if that puts you in that risk category, you would be eligible for that. So yes, that would be the case, is regardless, much like even though that you've got faculty that may be in a lower phase, if they meet one of the higher level, that automatically jumps them up. So yes, they would all be done based upon what it is that they're doing.
And tied to that, will MSU students in healthcare facility supervised practice rotations be able to get COVID vaccines through majors?
Go ahead, David. I know we've got our clinical students scheduled, I believe, for next week.
Yeah, so we've been getting many of those in the health department already. And so, that's really what we're trying to do. Anything that, if they're healthcare related, if we can get those within the health department, that's what we're trying to do. Could we get them into majors? Absolutely, because we know those are priority. So for example, we're going to be using many of those students probably to help us vaccinate if we go to a mass vaccination process. And so they would need to be vaccinated so that we could get them to do that. So yes, they would be able to get into majors. We're really hoping that we can get many of those within the health department, though.
We have a lot of people in that high risk category, and we're anticipating 250 to 300 vaccines that to have available next week. And so if our student clinical team can use health department vaccine, then that saves more of those vaccines that we have in-house in majors for our workforce that are in those high risk categories. And I think that's probably our preference, in part because most of the students doing clinical work were already being scheduled before we learned today that we were going to get some vaccine in at majors on Monday.
Okay, that leads to the next question. So I think it's tier 2. So our employees 65 or over, or those who are have compromised health situation. Oh, it just left me. They will be the first ones through then next week. Is that correct? Through majors, have the eligibility to sign up for that.
Go ahead, David.
That's correct. Yeah, so they would fall into that category, that tier 2 phase. Of course, nothing's easy whenever it comes out from the state and federal government. So it's phase 1B, they're in tier 2. So if you're in tier 2 or tier 1, and so tier 2 are those that are 65 or older, or if you're 16 to 64 and you have an underlying health condition, one of those that's outlined by the state, then you would be able to get the vaccination. Really, you can get it whether it's at majors or anywhere else. You may be able to reach out, like say, to any other healthcare provider and see if you can get in, or a pharmacy. It'd probably be a while before pharmacies are able to roll that out because they're focused on long-term care facilities. But yes, that's correct.
So
yes, So I've got Dr. Cisco has been engaging with Dr. Maggie. And so we will begin vaccinating the people that are eligible on Tuesday next week. And there will be a sign up available if you're in the A1A and A1B categories. And so again, everyone over 65 is eligible. If you have a specific underlying health condition that makes you a high risk, you're also eligible. And so again, you can begin signing up and getting shots at majors on Tuesday of next week.
If their spouses are also eligible, number one, would they be able to come into majors? And if their spouse is eligible but covered by another insurance company, would they be able to come into majors as well? Or another insurance plan be able to come into majors as well, as long as if they are a university employee?
I think if you're a university employee and you fit into one of the categories, you can sign up to get your shot here.
And if their spouse is eligible but not a university employee? But
again, again, we're still working through all of this, and we've got 4,000 people in our health plan, and we're going to have about 300 vaccines next week. And so my preference would be that we vaccinate our workforce first. But again, all of those details will be worked out. The sign-up sheet will be up. The sign-up on My Missouri State will be up on Monday, and the shots will begin being given out on Tuesday.
Following that line, then, the remainder of our employees who don't fall in will really mostly fall in phase 2 for immunization. Is that correct?
They will. It appears that they're going to be in phase or in tier 2. Is that right, David? And there's still conversation about that. You might address that issue.
Yeah, I two notes on that is there's also a tier 3. So after those with the age 65 and older, and those under 65 with underlying health conditions, the next phase of that includes some critical infrastructure. So so there are other employees within those groups that might qualify. So we're really trying to look at, and I use, for example, the energy sector is one of those that qualifies once we get to phase 3. It's not there until we do phase 2, but once we get to tier 3, those, for example, in our powerhouse would be eligible for that. Those that are doing facilities that keep the heat and air conditioning running, do our electrical systems. So there's certain categories that are going to fall within that. And then the general, if you don't have any underlying health condition, you're not in one of those target, critical infrastructure, then yes, right now, we would expect that they'll be in phase 2. We know that there is a lot of discussion recommending that we, as a whole, higher ed be moved up into that tier 3. And the reason, because K-12, that's where they are at, is in it. And at first that really puzzled me, but once I understood the philosophy of it, is because they're really focused on that category 1. So category A, B, C, they're really trying to focus on is how do we keep people with food, with electricity, with they can't do that if their children are not in school or if they don't have daycare. So that's the reason they put those in that category C. And again, we'll see if they end up moving higher ed or not. But we got a lot of people to vaccinate well before we ever get to that, even if they move us up.
Yeah. So again, just to try to summarize this, phase 1A, that's healthcare and long-term care facilities. That's been going on for several weeks. Today, phase 1B1, first responders, emergency service, and public health opened up. On Monday, phase 1B2, high-risk individuals opens up. Those are adults with specific healthcare issues and anyone over 65. So that's what we'll be focusing on at majors beginning on Tuesday when we reopen back up. Tier 3 of phase 1B are those other people working at the power plant. Could be people working in the child development center, could be our Greenwood teachers. So anyone that fits into one of these categories and we have vaccine, we're going to open it up so that we get as many of our employees vaccinated as quickly as we can. And then any of our employees that don't hit either phase 1B, tier 1, 2, or 3, are likely to be in phase 2. And then phase 3 is everybody else. And so we had hoped that most of our group would be in that phase 1B. As of right now, we have to be in a subcategory, and it's probably a third to a half of our employees instead of everyone. Again, that's not our decision, but we're obligated to follow it.
Okay, so those with underlying medical conditions, will they need to provide proof when they come to majors to get the vaccine?
David?
Yeah, we will not require that. We're going to be laying out, here's what has been approved. And so then whenever you come to it, you'll indicate that, you'll say as, yes, I meet that definition. So it's the way that we've been, the health department, everyone else is. So it's kind of on the honor system. And we're hoping that people are, respectful of that, because there is, a logic or reason as to why it's set up the way it's tiered. But no, we would not require any type of proof to say, oh, I've got a health condition and here's exactly what it is.
And we have confidence in you that you're going to honestly tell us, what category you're in. And if you're in one of these categories, then you need to sign up. And if you're not in one of these categories, because there's limited vaccine, we would ask that you allow those that are high risk to go in front of you. And when it's your turn, as soon as it's your turn, we'll let you know.
Okay, will employees still have the option to work from home if they are considered high risk, even if they get the vaccine, since there hasn't been much time to do studies to really know how effective the vaccines are?
Yeah, so we are beginning to talk about, as an academic leadership team and as an administrative leadership team, what the post-COVID-19 world looks like, what the post-COVID-19 vaccine world at least looks like. I anticipate that by and large this semester we'll continue to operate the way we did last semester and this semester, at least for the next couple of months, and that we'll solicit lots of input and develop plans for what fall of this year looks like. And so don't know a specific answer to if I'm working remotely right now, will I still be working remotely in April or May? We just need to see what the world looks like. How much of our what are the cases in Greene County doing? What does our student population look like? How much vaccine has been distributed? How widely? So don't know the answer to all of that, but know the direction that I've given to our folks is we're going to remain as flexible as we can through this semester, while at the same time developing what we want our workforce to look like when we come back in the fall. And that's not every higher ed institution's not doing that. For example, most of the other institutions in town are requiring everybody to be at their office every day, absent a specific accommodation.
Okay, will graduate assistants be considered employees in the vaccination cycle?
They should be. If they're teaching a class, then they're the same as anybody else in terms of how the world is looking at the vaccine.
If I do not have insurance through the university, I already have it through a spouse's plan, am I still able to get the vaccine on campus?
If you're an employee that is in a criteria, you can get the vaccine on campus.
Okay. Since the vaccine rolled out so quickly, how do we know if it really works for a particular group?
Yeah, I think we have to trust science by and large. David Claiborne, you might be prepared to jump in here in terms of kind of the science behind vaccines. But I was on a call with our hospital leaders. They have already said that from November to December to January, the number of their employees testing positive for COVID has gone down by a third, as they have been vaccinating people. David, talk a little bit about the science behind vaccines and how we know it works.
Most of the testing has not been curtailed in that there's been a lot of kind of red tape that's been cut back, but most of the testing has been consistent with previous work. Now, one of the things that they're being very careful about is making sure that they only recommend it for populations that have been tested. And that's one of the reasons why they are hesitant to recommend it for people younger than 15 or 16 or something like that. But for the most part, they're meeting the safety standards and the efficacy standards of previous tests.
I might jump in there for just a second as well and just say, there are certain conditions, and there's a lot of good information on the CDC website on this. But so, for example, if someone is pregnant, they may want to check with their healthcare provider, if they've had immune compromise because of cancer or other things like that. So, I think that's where it kind of gets to those sub classifications like what you're talking about. And that's a conversation you ought to have with your healthcare provider.
There have been a handful of people that have had adverse allergic reactions to the vaccine. That's why we think it's important that if you use majors to get the shot, just know that if you had a reaction, people there will be prepared to address that and deal with that to make sure that you safely make it through that kind of reaction. And so, in a world where almost 400,000 people have died in the United States from COVID-19, a handful of adverse reactions to a vaccine that have been managed because you're in a doctor's office and people have the resources there to address if you're 1 in 100,000 that has that vaccine. That's a pretty easy risk analysis for me that I think I want to get the vaccine.
Okay. Will staff be required to show proof of their vaccination at any point? And will faculty staff be required to get the vaccine?
We do not anticipate requiring anyone to get the vaccine. We will encourage it. We'll likely incentivize it. We hope you feel comfortable doing it. If you don't feel comfortable immediately, over time, as you see your coworkers get it, I suspect there'll be things in the world that you'll want to do that will require you to have a vaccine. You may need a vaccine to travel on an airplane. You may need a vaccine to go to a concert. You may need a vaccine to go on a military base. There could be all sorts of requirements like that, but the university has no plans to require anyone to get a vaccine. It's your call.
How do we get the document proof that we have been vaccinated?
David, do you know the answer to that?
I do. What they'll do is your provider, they're going to give you it's just like your immunization card that you got whenever, we were little, and it will have it on there, and it will have that you were given this. It will also give you the date whenever you should get your next vaccine, because it gives you the type and to go with that. So it's got all of that information that will go on it. So, and that's what you keep as your record. It's an immunization record, a little card.
Yeah. So remember, everyone, if you're fortunate enough to be vaccinated next week, 3 weeks down the road, you need to go back and get the second one because it's a 2-shot test. I think the data is like it gives you a 70 to 75% protection on shot 1, but to get up to 95% protection, you need to get shot 2. So just know there's a 2-part, and you need to get the same kind of shot. So if you get a Pfizer shot at Mercy or at Majors, you need to come back and get a Pfizer shot for your second shot. If you get a Moderna shot at Cox, you need to go back and get the second shot, a Moderna shot, so that you match up there.
Okay. Will the vaccine be free of charge if we get it at Mercy rather than Majors?
David, do you know if do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, the Majors is doing it much like what we do. The testing is you won't have any out-of-pocket cost for getting that done. There is an administrative fee that they can charge, but they bill that to the health insurance, or they will take care of that internally, through their write-off.
Do you know if Mercy is charging their folks?
I do not believe that they are. I don't know if Matt or others might have that, but I do not believe that they are.
Correct.
Okay, good. So that confirms that there's no cost whether you go to Mercy or whether you go to I presume the health department, or whether you go to Majors Clinic.
Okay, this is a two-part, and I think we've said it, but it probably bears repeating. Where is the sign up for the vaccine offered? And if we have a dependent on our medical insurance, where will they sign up to register to get the vaccine?
David?
Yeah, so the if you're going to go through Majors, then you'll go through the exact same process that you would if you were signing up to get the flu shot. So if you remember that process, you go into My Missouri State, and then that's where you go through and you schedule your appointment. We'll have good details on that. By the time it is to roll out, by the time it is to sign up early this next week. Like I say, we didn't even know until just a couple hours ago that we were going to get any vaccine this week. So that's why that was a change in plan. Nor would they let us go to that next tier. So all of that, we've been re-scrambling on that and making sure that we're ready for that. But you can do that. You can also go to that Mercy link that was provided in the presentation if you're going through Mercy in order to request that, if you're if that's who provides your health care on it. And that would be the same thing true for whenever family members. So again, we're focused on getting the employees through right now, but as we get to family members, it would be the same process, just like what you do with your flu shot whenever you have a family member.
So can you also review again what they can monitor to see when the opportunity is available for them to get or sign up for the vaccine or to get the vaccine?
Yes, so it will be, if you go to the Missouri State homepage and you click on that COVID banner at the top, it's going to have a big button, right? Once you get there, it's going to have a big button on our COVID page, and it's going to be everything about vaccinations. We're going to continue to add in FAQs and information as we get that. So that way you'll have all of this that will be able to give you information. It'll also be included on the Inside Missouri State each week on what tier or what phase that we're in and what tier that we're in. And so and then we'll also be providing the definitions of what is it that fits within each of those. So, check that website and check the Inside Missouri State to keep abreast on where we at within the vaccine, as well as the vaccine availability.
Okay, even if a large percentage of faculty and staff get vaccinated by the end of the semester, will the masking policies and other related travel restrictions likely remain in effect for this summer and fall?
Yeah, summer and fall is a long way away. We will continue to work with the city and to make sure that our masking policy, our events policy, our travel policies are consistent with theirs. The city has already begun looking at, I think the city's policy on masking goes through April 9th. And so they're beginning to work to figure out how long that masking policy is going to be in place. I frankly think the masking policy will be in place all through the at least this semester and maybe beyond. But I think there are too many unknowns to know, will we require masking at any location in the fall? I think we're just going to have to watch how events develop and what our experts in public health and in medicine tell us. and we see, you know, how fast does the rollout go? The president-elect hopes to have 100 million Americans vaccinated in the first 100 days. Is that reasonable? I don't know. You know, if we're only at 30 million instead of 100 million, that could impact what the summer looks like. And so, you know, this summer we are doing classes almost identically to how we did them a year ago. So 95% of our classes will be online, and just a handful of things will be meeting in person. We'll be doing one-day SOAR sessions, some of which will be in person, some of which will be virtual. Again, don't know if we'll have a masking requirement for those. I think it's just too far out to know what the world looks like. But do know that we will get expert input from Dr. Claiborne, Dr. Maggie, the local health department, the CDC, the federal government, our state government, as we see how things unfold and what the world looks like this summer and then into the fall.
Okay,
If I could add, I think travel will be impacted a lot by what the Centers for Disease Control, what the State Department, there's a whole lot of different agencies that will weigh in on travel, especially if it's international. So we'll have to just monitor that and adjust to it.
So we're not doing study away trips over spring break, obviously, but we are beginning. We have not made a decision over what summer travel looks like. And again, I think we're going to have to see what the world looks like and how quickly Europe and Asia and America, South America, how the vaccine rollout goes.
Okay, since we're kind of in the masking area, I'll continue there. What do we do? And this one has been upvoted with 12 votes. What do we do if our professors are not following the mask mandate within the classrooms? What course of action would you take towards faculty and staff who refuse to wear or enforce the mask mandate and social distancing?
So what I would, if that question presumably comes from a student, if you're in a class where the faculty member is not enforcing the mask mandate, I would suggest you let your dean or the provost know that so that we can follow up, because that is a university policy approved by our board and it will be enforced.
Okay, we have been able to enforce masking at Greenwood in our building, but our problem is at basketball games with people coming in with other teams refusing to wear masks. Our students and families do comply with masking, but we get lots of complaints after games, including the Winter Classic that was recently held last night.
I don't know if I have an answer to that here, but if you would send me an email that outlined that, then I will get with Dr. Tinkler and Dr. Huff and Janice Duncan, and we will work on that. Because frankly, in any of our events, it is our goal to enforce our policies. And so if that's a significant problem for high school basketball that's being played at Greenwood, then we need to address that. And so if you'll send me an email, that will be a reminder that I can forward to others, and we will get an answer on, we will get a resolution of that as best we can.
Okay, we have Kishore is in the room. He has a question. Is it significantly safer to wear on campus 2 masks instead of 1 mask?
Dr. Claiborne, you have any thoughts on that?
Couldn't hurt, but I'm sorry, I don't have any data on that. I do wear, and when I'm in a class now, I wear a mask and a face shield. And if I'm well enough away from, far enough away from the students, I'll pull the mask down so they can see my lips while I'm speaking. So I would recommend that.
The other thing I would say is I do think there's data that says if your mask is multi-layers of cloth, that is more protective than just a single layer of cloth. David Hall, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and Yeah, there is research out there, and actually it went all the way up to a 14 ply layers on that. And as you would not be surprised, is the more layers that you have, the more effective that the mask was, the masking. There's some also to kind of go with that. There's some, for example, is you've got your surgical, or where it's got a barrier in there that's that they've shown that's more effective as well. In addition to the cloth, it's all about the particulates, or the larger particulates, not the small stuff, not the aerosolization, though.
Okay, thank you. I'm jumping in with a testing question. Are asymptomatic tests available for curbside pickup like they were over break?
David?
Yeah, I'll take. Yeah, we do not do that. And during the semester, since we provide it on campus and available, then instead we have them come by and get the test. Here's what we ran into over that, and we thought that was a good strategy, and I still think it's a good strategy of how we could get testing out whenever the university was closed, or whenever we didn't have students on campus. But the what we found is a significant number of those were getting picked up and not getting returned, or taking, and I don't want to say just they were getting more and said, well, as I want to use them, then I'll use them, and it just was too hard to maintain control, and so we can't get those. It just was too hard to control. Since we're offering it on campus, we did not see that there was a need for that. However, if somebody needs specific testing, so we do run into that, somebody who's in quarantine, and that's how we can get them out of quarantine early, then let us know and we work out on how to get that to them. But as far as just to call and say, hey, we want to stop by and pick up some test kits, take them with us, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So I noticed,
No, I was going to say, so I hear David say that in special circumstances, you could arrange that. You could email Karen McGinnis or David Hall and explain your situation, but typically not. The tests cost what, about $100 a piece, David?
Those particular ones are running about 65 because we're able to do pooled tests with them, but it's still it was a significant amount of money that we end up that it's just kind of gone out, and we've not seen any results, because we get the results of the test whenever they get them back, and we just whenever they actually submit them, then we get obviously, so we know whether they're positive or not. So we know how many are out there that have never been returned.
So I notice on social media that we post each day where someone can pick up an asymptomatic test. And last week it was at the PSU. Will it continue to be in the same room on campus, or is it going to be in different locations? And where, if I don't see it on social media, is there someplace else I can check to see where on campus they are available on a particular day?
Yeah, so we do rotate that around the campus. And the reason we do that is it's a convenient sample, and Dr. Claiborne could certainly weigh in on that. But it's because he's analyzing all the data on that, because we're looking for trends in that kind of that underlying positivity rate. So we do move that around so that we don't only get the same pool of students and employees every time. So we'll maybe go to the library, or we may be in Strong Hall, or we'll be in PSU. Now this week we've been in the PSU the entire week, and we were fortunate they allowed us to use the Union Club in there. And so we were using that because we still had return to campus for students needing a place to go. But I would say is, if you want to know where they're at, and we do it regularly at PSU. If you want to know where they're at, though, you can always go onto the COVID website. It's got a link on there that talks about asymptomatic testing, and it's constantly being updated, and where it is that you can go. And we're working on getting that to where that it is a regular, you can know on this day you can get it here, and this day you can get it here, and this day you can get it here. So you'll see that, again, a lot of that related to staffing, and we're pretty good in getting staffed up to where that we've got that ability.
Okay, great, thank you. Why isn't there a masking requirement for exercise facilities?
It is Many people that exercise would find it challenging to do so if they were required to wear a mask. And the standard practice in our community and in gyms in our community has not been to require that.
Okay. Thank you. Are there contingency safety guidelines being developed for seated classes in response to the more contagious coronavirus variants like B.1.1.7, the UK variant, that may have more airborne transmission and may become more common locally?
So Matt, that may be a question for you in terms of a space question. But we might use this to just kind of outline kind of where we are in terms of space now in classrooms, and then talk about the potential if we had a more contagious variant, what changes would we evaluate?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to speak on the space topic. As was alluded to earlier, 40% of our classes have some sort of an online component. So therefore, there's 60% with some sort of seated component there. Because of that, we certainly have classroom openings throughout campus. And so each college has a schedule builder there. Also centrally, we have room scheduling services that are available. The software system that all the space is reserved in, the academic space, I refer to as EMS. Within that EMS system, the faculty member can clearly see if you're going to enforce in your classroom a 3-foot social distancing, what the capacity would be. There's also a 6-foot capacity of what that room holds as well. And so the options that I would suggest would be, one, check with that schedule builder or the central room scheduling and let us help you to see if there's a larger room that you could possibly move to if you wanted to socially distance more than you're currently doing within your space. Or two, let's look and see if you want to bump up to a 6-foot capacity, and we can find a room to help support you there as well. As far as the variant is concerned, I'll rely on the scientists for that. But again, from a social distancing standpoint, we have the increased Zoom capabilities. There are now an additional 60 rooms, as was referenced earlier. I saw one solution where a faculty member actually divided their class and put one over in this room and Zoomed over to it while they were physically present with another group in another room as well. So again, we want to be flexible and help you with your room and space needs in any way that we can.
You know, I think if the variant becomes the dominant strain and the result of that is there are thousands of people that contract the virus instead of 50 to 100 in a given week, well, that changes everything. And that changes our analysis of whether we can continue to hold events and seated classes. And just know that if the world that is now Great Britain becomes Springfield, Missouri, then our whole team will be evaluating how we move forward in that environment. And we may make very different decisions than we're making right now.
Okay, this may be a little bit of a repeat, but I do want to ask it. Do all face-to-face classes on campus have social distancing, or is social distancing optional as long as students wear masks?
Matt?
We allow the faculty member to make that decision based upon what they're teaching in that classroom. Again, we offer the 3 feet and the 6 feet capacities from social distancing. The masks are the non-negotiable item. It is required, as has been discussed here with the policy. Frank, anything I'm missing on that?
No, you're correct on all counts, but we have, even since the semester started, invited anybody that has at least been able to hear this through the deans, if we need to move to a larger class, to ask for that and work with, as you said, either central scheduling or their schedule builder directly in their department, because at least early on now, we have alternative classroom space that's larger. It will not necessarily be in your building and right down the hall. And that always is the question that is accompanying that issue. But we currently have the opportunity for bigger rooms.
Okay, thank you. In hallways, it has been very difficult to enforce masking, especially in plaster. How does this fit into our process?
In which building?
They note plaster as an example.
Student union?
I'll say yes.
Okay. Dee, do you want to talk about masking in the auxiliary spaces?
Certainly, we require masking in all of those spaces as well. In the Plaster Student Union, they have been worked very hard to create space so that students could spread out. In the food court, they have tables marked so that students don't sit too closely together. There is markings on all of the furniture within the building so that students are understanding how to spread out and socially distance. But the staff are constantly encouraging mask wearing, and we haven't seen too many difficulties that I've heard of.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about online exams. Will someone look into the policy of allowing online students multiple days to take their exam? There's no reason online students can't schedule a day to take the exam when it is known in advance and reduce risk of sharing information about exams. This was upvoted by 11 people.
Frank, you want to address online exams?
We typically have, and we have requested all faculty in the online exam process to at least allow 24 hours. So they have some flexibility to, find a place if they don't have good access at home or otherwise. We have not mandated multiple days. So I'm not sure which way that question is directed. We have not mandated multiple days. We've only mandated 24 hours. Some people are allowing multiple days, but that's been an instructor guided possibility.
Okay, thank you. We have a request for an inclement weather policy clarification.
No, sorry, no snow questions today.
Well, no snow. It just says, if MSU is closed, can instructors require students to attend class via Zoom? I know some public and private K through 12 have implemented such policies.
So the hardest, we've gone through a pandemic and all sorts of god-awful budget reductions and lots of challenging things. Nothing is more challenging than our inclement weather policy. Nothing. We had a conversation in administrative council this week about adjusting the inclement weather policy, given the fact that 40% of our classes are online and many people are working remotely. And it is a challenging thing to do. And we did not want to create a policy in a pandemic that would have disadvantaged and made many of our employees unhappy. And rather, we wanted to get through the pandemic and evaluate what changes, if any, were appropriate for the inclement weather policy when we're not also dealing with the pandemic. And I think it'll change sometime for next year. For the year that we're in, we're going to continue to operate under the current policy. And so I would think if a seated class that would include a Zoom class, if we cancel classes, that all of those classes are going to be canceled. online classes should continue to operate as is. Frank, am I right on that?
Yes, that's my view. Obviously, sometimes an instructor might make a choice that doesn't fit that. But if a Zoom class has been running with the Zoom typically initiated here in a classroom, and it would be canceled like any other seated class. The in-between part will be if the Zoom is being initiated from other points, then it'll become an argument. But in general, I agree that it should be a cancellation situation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more vaccine questions and then we'll get to the data because people want to know about their data. So I need the Davids to get ready for that. The first, one of the last vaccine questions is, will custodial staff have a higher priority for the vaccine?
David, do you remember where custodial workers fit into the tier 1, 2, or 3 if they do, or whether they would be in phase 2?
I'll have to look at it. It would either be if they don't meet the 65 or older health condition, then I'll have to look and see whether they will fall under category tier 3 or they would go into that phase 2. That I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that a little bit more.
Again, these are not decisions that we are making. These are decisions that the state is making and we're being told to operationalize.
Okay, thank you. And I won't say it's the last, but it's one of the last questions on the vaccinations. I know we talked about, we have to remember to come back for the second vaccination, but how will we be managing the second round of shots?
David, do we know that yet?
No, we don't. Like I say, what they'll do is they're going to give you a card and they're going to say is you need to sign back up after this date in order to get this same brand of vaccine. And there's obviously discussion at the federal level. You've seen some of this probably on national news. Is do they just roll it out and get everybody one to start with? That's better than the other. So who knows where they're going to end up with? The kind of the theory is that, vaccine rollout is going to be multiplying. It's going to be going up at accelerated rate. And so that's why they'll be expecting that you get your first one. And by the second time it's for your second one, you should, that they should have that available.
Yeah. And the vaccine, we believe, is just as effective if you get your second shot in 3 weeks or 8 weeks. So you're not hurt by getting it at 8 weeks, other than you're not fully vaccinated yet. And so again, I think we're going to have to see how the new federal administration rolls this out. But I heard Steve Edwards, CEO at Cox, say this week, and Clay Goddard said the same thing. At some point over the next several months, we're going to have more vaccine than we can use. And so there's going to be a period of time of scarcity over the next, 3 to 6 weeks. And then at some point, we're going to have more vaccine than we need. And so everyone will get their second shot. They may not get it right at that 3-week mark.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're off to the data. This one got a 10 upvotes. You presented raw data and opportunistic data sets. How are you estimating infections from the greater population of Missouri State? And are those available somewhere?
David, do you know what that question means? You're muted there, my friend.
I can take that, David.
Go ahead.
Okay. We have 2 different data sets you're looking at. Most of what David presented were the people who had tested positive and had symptoms. We also have a convenience sample on campus in which we're looking at asymptomatic people. Last semester, we had about 1,300 people who did this. This included about 75% of those were students and about 25% were faculty and staff. in both groups, we saw about somewhere between 1% and 2% of the people were positive. Now, these were asymptomatic people. This is a convenient sample because we tried to do this as a random sampling, which would be the best science, obviously, but we just couldn't get enough people interested. So we do convenient sampling. The good thing is that the convenient sample is reflecting the similar demographics to the student population. As far as is this available, I'm working on a report. It's gratifying that somebody actually wants to see it. And I will be glad to share that once I run it through the powers that be.
All right, thank you, David. Are the numbers represented on the graphs, this talking about fall data, of individuals only tested at the health center, or are those in the reported COVID data which faculty have submitted that affect our broader student population, or those tested within the community?
So the charts that David showed of how many people were positive come from all sources, right? They come from people that were tested at majors. They come from people that were tested asymptomatically. They come from athletic tests. They come from people that were tested anywhere on, and that report comes back to us either from the county health department or from Mercy or through contact tracing. And so that's all positives of which we are aware. Might there be a handful that didn't make it into that chart? Absolutely. If you just got sick and you never got tested, we don't know it. If you somehow got sick here and got tested somewhere else, might it be possible that we didn't get that result? Sure. But that's the great bulk of the tests are from all sources.
Okay, and tied to this is actually a very long question, so I broke it up, and this part two, and I think you might have answered it, is since faculty are asked to submit information about their COVID cases / students in quarantine from their individual classes, just wondering if these numbers are being reported or if everything's just coming from majors testing.
David?
Yeah, I think that's been answered on that is, whenever we get reports, so we have, these forms are filled out online and we get a lot of those that are where they're reporting and where they were tested off campus, but it's from whatever sources where that we know that a student is, well, not just a student, where anyone is tested positive, who's been on campus, that all gets reported into that data. I use the only exception that we have, and this has only happened a couple times, is somebody, for example, a retiree who comes to majors just to get tested and leaves. We did not include that in there because they truly had not been on campus, so we're not part of it.
And again, related to that is, do we include data from students who were tested by their private physician and quarantined on their own? And is there a mechanism to capture these numbers?
So in that scenario, we should get that reported to us, either because the student reports it or because the health department gets it and then begins the contact tracing, which is going to connect that person back to us. So even if you are tested at an urgent care, if you're tested at a private clinic somewhere, there's contact tracing that is done with that person, and that's going to lead you back to the university. And in most cases, we should know of it and it gets counted.
Okay. Will the COVID daily case data eventually be available as a data set so it can be archived and made available to future researchers? In 50 years, that could be valuable to future decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. There are already people doing research. And so, we took the first semester data and it's now on a different part of the COVID website that you can look at. And we're starting to collect this semester's data, and the data of people that tested positive in between the end of last semester and the beginning of this semester is included. I mean, our goal is to keep all of this. Dr. Claiborne, I know you're doing lots of research with this. Do you want to talk about some of the projects that you're working on or anticipate your team would work on?
Sure. A lot of what we're looking at is some of the demographics associated with transmission and risk here. And most of what I'm working on is with the asymptomatic cases. So we're looking at things like what kind of housing arrangements you might have. And early data would suggest that living alone off campus is somewhat protective. Living in communal living is probably has a little bit higher risk. Being a male seems to suggest having a little bit higher risk. There's various different things like that that we're looking at. None of these stick out really as statistically significant, but there's some suggestions going on. So we're looking at that, and that'll be part of what we write up in the future is on these. Of course, eventually we'd like to extend this to the symptomatic people who have gone in and been and looked at that as well. We've also looked at things like how much time in a seated class in one spends, and if there's an increased risk with that. So all of these are things that we're looking at.
You know, on the testing of students returning to campus that lived in the residence hall, we're working with the CDC to compare the results from the PCR test to the antigen test, and that work will be written up. And so there's a lot of research that is either ongoing now or will be ongoing as a result of this data set, and we think it will be important that we preserve this information and that we continue for years to come to analyze it.
Okay, thank you. I had several students test positive, yet I was never notified by anyone other than them. We have the seating charts that we are supposed to use, yet that information was never gathered. Why not? My kids are in public school and we are always notified of possible exposure.
David, that one's yours. David Hall.
Yep. So one of the struggles we ran into with the contact tracing in the classrooms, because we were pulling that data, part of it is the amount of time initially it was taken because of the sheer volume. But as we got into it, we kind of automated the process to where that we could do that quickly. But what we found was you have to know a lot of information to make that decision. So for example, is when was the person first symptomatic that was positive? And then once you find out that, were they in class? And then you have to find out those that are around them, were they in class on those same days? And you have to find out is, were they within that 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? What we found was you ended up putting people in quarantine that should not have been. And we were not putting them in quarantine when they should have been. So whenever professors would move to an online format for even a day, then we did not have that in the seating charts. It became very problematic in order to do that. With the shortening of the time frame of how long you are in quarantine, it's really not very feasible. What we're doing this semester, we're still asking those with the high risk classes. So for example, if you've got a lab class and you're having interactions and close interactions within that, then put those seating charts in there, because we know those tend to be actually seated in the classroom, and then we can work quickly to be able to get those. So that way we're focused on those that are highest risk. But really it was a combination of factors as to why, but it really became problematic where we just had to quit there before the end of just before we went on Thanksgiving break, because it was we were doing more harm than good.
Okay, thank you. We have a Keyshore question number 2. Is the air quality in Cheek Hall and other campus buildings checked every day or so for a higher level of safety?
Matt, is that your arena?
Well, I'm happy to talk about what we have in the past about replacing air filters, making sure we have the MERV 13. as far as checking daily, that would not be the case. We have preventative maintenance work orders that are issued out on a regular basis where our mechanics in the field check our air handling units to be sure they're working properly, that we're pumping in an appropriate amount of outside air. And of course, that changes quite frequently. So they are always in the building doing servicing equipment. And so I hope that answers, but very similar practice to what we did last semester, maintaining appropriate filters and making sure equipment is running the way it is supposed to.
Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to kind of category other. We have lost a couple of longtime staff members due to COVID over the last couple of months. Is there any kind of discussion about a possible memorial for them?
Matt, you want to take that one?
Yeah, it has been tough. Within facilities management, we have lost 2 employees. Staff Senate actually initiated a memorial fund for our former assistant director, Jason Ray. We are going to incorporate something in his honor that will be incorporated in the art pavilion area around Ellis, Craig, the south side of Hill Hall, to really honor what his family desires. And so we're really excited for that. I would say if anybody is interested in that, there is an opportunity to contribute. We put a budget goal for raising funds of $5,000, and we were getting very close to that the last time I checked. The second employee that passed away more recently during the winter break, Bill Self, again, a valued staff member with us. And again, we certainly will be thinking of ways, but in communications with the family, to make sure that we're doing it in a way that honors the family.
I might jump in and add as well, the university does an annual memorial service for any bears that are lost throughout the year. And so that will be held on April the 29th. And so there'll be more information coming out. But of course, we would want to include and celebrate any of those individuals as well.
Okay, thank you. Going back to a vaccine question, will we have to come into majors to get the vaccine? Any plans for open air drive-up clinics?
You're going to have to go into majors to get the vaccine. You need to be in the clinic in case you are the 1 in 100,000 that has an adverse reaction to it. And so we're confident we can do that safely. That'll be the same practice that occurs if you get it at the health center or at Mercy. But yes, you'll have to go into the clinic.
Okay, we have another question from Keyshore that falls in the other category, kind of other. What will Missouri State University be doing to assist the underrepresented and minority communities near but outside of the campus with regard to disseminating correct vaccine information?
I don't know that I have an answer to that. Does we are a majors clinic has been designated a vaccinator, and so at some point, once we've taken care of our workforce population, then we have the ability to use vaccine if we have additional to vaccinate anyone within a category. And so to the extent that that would engage the MSU Cares Clinic and people that get health care there, that is certainly possible. But again, I think our primary focus is on our workforce first, the dependence of our workforce, and then ultimately our students when that opens up. For those that get care at MSU Cares Clinic, we'll certainly work with Mercy to make sure they have the opportunity to become vaccinated as well.
Okay, we're kind of going back to the COVID initiatives for this semester. Will the Zoom classrooms also have computers with microphones and cameras this time? Will those rooms set up previously as Zoom capable be adapted to include both?
Frank?
We do not have microphones in all of the rooms. The size of the room has dictated where we put the microphones we've been able to get. They were in very short supply, back ordered. So the large rooms got the first choice on microphones, and some rooms previously had the fixed microphone that would suffice and continued. Then we got a number of ones that could be sort of lapel type microphones. But the answer is that not all rooms had microphones.
Okay, thank you. How are we supporting students that are dealing with COVID directly or indirectly and may have faculty that are not understanding or flexible?
You know, the first thing I would say is the great majority of our faculty have been amazing. And we have gotten literally thousands of notes from students or references in student surveys commending their faculty for really good work. On the rare occasion when a faculty member would say would not fall within that description, and it has been reported to the provost office or my office or Dr. Sisko's office, then we have tried to work with that faculty member through a department head or dean to make sure that all of our students have been treated appropriately. Frank, what else would you add to that, or Dee, you as well?
I guess I just reinforced that I'm really proud and pleased with the great work the faculty have done to be flexible. One of the greater problems we did run into is that classes that were being moved to Zoom, meeting at the same time, and then in a few cases, people said, well, I can't meet the class at that time. That kind of a class, in most cases, was able to be recorded, but it wasn't like we could always move somebody to another section because there may not have been another section, to move them to. We moved some. But again, we've tried to work with anybody. And when we've tried to work with faculty that initially thought they were doing what was right, but needed more flexibility, we've had, I think, real good response.
Dee, anything you would add?
Not really. I think that sums it up, but students can always reach out to any of our staff if they need help navigating that process, and we're happy to assist in student affairs.
Dean of Students Office is a great entry point if someone is struggling with and the student views the faculty member as being inflexible. That's a good entry point that we can get the provost office involved or a dean involved and evaluate whether that's true or not. I mean, it is still important that our classes maintain their rigor even during a pandemic, because it's going to be essential that you learn what you need to learn to advance to the next class and graduate fully ready to enter the workforce or go to graduate school. And so we try to we try to make sure that classes remain rigorous and teach the substance, while at the same time recognizing we are in a pandemic and additional flexibility is often required. And I think most of our faculty have done a really good job at that.
Hey, thank you. Student athletes are coming out of Plaster Stadium exercise rooms frequently, do not wear masks in the hallway, and thus intermingle with students on their way to and from classrooms. How will masking be better enforced going forward? the athletes frequently ignore the faculty request to mask up?
If whoever sent that question in will send me an email, I will get that to the athletic director, and we will work to he will work to do a better job of enforcing masking in that situation.
Okay, thank you. Is there any criteria to decide if when campus will be shut down due to COVID?
You know, we've talked about a variety of things over this year that could cause us to alter how we deliver classes. And I think we're at a point that you know, there's a spectrum now. It's you know, back in March, before we knew anything, it was all or nothing. I think we're very unlikely to ever be in an all or nothing situation. We've been working, you know, class by class, program by program to manage through that. Could there be a situation that requires many classes to convert for a period of time to alternative delivery? Of course there could be. You know, and so numbers of cases, hospitalizations, hospital capacity, I mean, lots of vaccination distribution, the variant that is the UK, and if it's widely, you know, here, all of those things factor in a decision that some or all classes might, for a period of time, move to alternate delivery. It might not be 100% of classes. It could be 90% of classes. But so, I mean, we've outlined these factors before. They're still in play now. We have more information now. We have more testing now. We have you know, with the wastewater testing specific to residence halls, you know, we might very well require something to occur in a particular residence hall because of testing that's done there. So we have a lot more tools in the toolkit. And the more tools that you have, the less you have to use the sledgehammer as your only tool. And so I think we're probably not in a situation, absent a catastrophic situation, where we would close everything down. I think we have lots more options today than we did 10 months ago, and lots more data, lots more testing. The vaccine is rolling out. So again, we are engaged in monitoring all of these kinds of levels. Obviously, if we get to the point where we can't house students that need to be in quarantine or isolation, we have to change. And if our hospitals can't treat our workforce or our students who are sick, well, then we have to modify what we're doing. Those are the biggest drivers. But I would think that we are much more likely to have a nuanced response instead of a one size fits all, where either everything is open or everything is closed response.
Okay, thank you. Has the university made any plans to deal with potentially bad, violent behavior in response to the presidential inauguration and/or transition?
So we've had no bad, violent behavior on campus since the insurrection attempt of last Wednesday. We track social media regularly. We've seen no indication that there are going to be protests or violence on campus next Wednesday when President-elect Biden becomes president. And we're engaged with our local police force. We're engaged with information from the state of Missouri. We're engaged in tracking social media. I don't have any reason to think that Wednesday is going to be a day of violence on our campus.
Okay, thank you. Recreational sports have continued on campus. These sports are not requiring masks and many students are participating. Why is this being permitted during a pandemic?
So we're talking about our intramurals, I take it. So Dr. Cisco, you want to take that one?
Certainly. We have continued intramural sports, and Foster Rec Center has been open. We require students or participants to wear masks if they're not engaged in physical activity. But if they're actually playing in a sport, then we have not required them to wear a mask in that case, just like athletic sports would be the case. So we have developed a number of additional safety protocols. For example, you may know we've closed Foster at different intervals throughout the day for cleaning. And we're enforcing people wearing masks when they're not engaged in physical activity. So I think we've taken a number of precautions, but in fact, we have continued intramural sports.
And you've seen, as you saw that number, of positive cases that we had of every week through the semester, we were able to run our intramural sports program without any kind of spikes as a result of doing that. And the other thing we've got to remember is we've got to give our students safe things to do. We can't expect our students to just sit in their rooms with no activity. That causes significant mental health issues. It likely results in more dangerous activities going on. And so we've tried to, have athletic contests that allow spectators to come watch. We've continued to allow our student organizations to operate in modified form. We continue to show movies and play games and do things, though in a modified way with limited capacity, because it's also important that students maintain their sanity during the pandemic, particularly when we know that the 18 to 22-year-old population typically doesn't have the same reaction to this virus that all of us on the panel might have should we get the virus.
Okay, thank you. I am in the immunocompromised category, tier 2. Since my wife who lives with me would she also be eligible next week due to my circumstance?
Don't know the answer to that. We just got word literally 2 hours ago that we were getting the vaccine on Tuesday. And so we will sort that out. If you would send David Hall that question by an email, he will get you an answer before Tuesday. And so, Suzanne, it is 1 minute till 5. I'm gonna say if you've got one more question you want to ask, you can do that, and then we are gonna call this very long week over.
Let me see. What if your spouse is high risk but you are not? Can they register next week?
Again, we're still working out this question of dependence. I'm going to let Dr. Maggie, as the clinic director, ultimately make the call of who gets what shot when, as long as they're in a category. I would just tell you the people that are critical to me are all of our employees. And my hope would be that all of our employees in those high-risk categories get first opportunity to get the vaccine. But ultimately, I'm going to defer to Dr. Maggie to make that call.
And one last kind of tied to it, retirees, that will be addressed then as well.
Retirees obviously can continue to can access majors. They would be in that category. Again, when sign up begins either Monday or Tuesday morning, all the rules of who can sign up will be set out, and then we're gonna trust you. You're gonna be on the honor system and only sign up if you meet the category.
All right, thank you.
And with that, I hope everyone has a nice weekend, even if it's cold and snowy. And if you're out and if you can, there's a virtual Martin Luther King Day celebration that you can participate in as a part of our Heritage Trail. I know Gail and I plan to do that this weekend. I would encourage others to figure out how you would celebrate Martin Luther King Day either on Monday or this weekend. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday. And if you're eligible for the vaccine, get signed up. Take care.